Recording. Before we get thunderstormed on, oh my gosh, I wish you could see it. It's coming. How do you get a good job interview? How do you execute on a good job interview? What should you say in a job interview? And there have been lots of opinions about this. There's an email, there's a chat that came through. I'm not putting chat on the screen anymore, by the way, in case you hadn't noticed. So the question was, let me see if I can find it. Somebody said, I have a job interview with a client tomorrow. Do you have any advice for me? So I have lots of advice, and I would ask you, like usual, to combine it with other people's advice. First of all, I want to read some advice from Damadutch. It says, regarding a job interview, one of the best pieces of advice I've ever seen was that when they ask you if you have any questions, you start to use the word when they hire you. So things like when they hire you. So when I start working with you, what are the projects that I could start using? What are the technologies that I would be immediately using? So you're talking about what's going on already at that moment, right? You get them thinking in their brain that they're already most people that are hiring you, they already know this trick, they've heard about this trick, and it's just a matter of you executing on the trick. But the whole point is getting them to think in their mind that they've actually hired you. Um, a bit of I'm just going to throw out the other advice that comes to mind. Obviously, we already talked about the resume. There's a whole video about the resume. The thing with the resumes that you got to keep in mind is that the resumes are, I mean, why are you taking advice about job interviews from a guy living in his car currently? By the way, I'm just going on a trip in my car. I'm not living in it. So, um, because I have the money to pay for a trip in my car. How about that? Okay. So watch the video about the resume, right? The resume is the discussion point. That's the thing. You can refer to your resume because they likely haven't read your resume. Most of the people don't care about your resume. That's what the video is about. And so what you can do is you can say, well, as I mentioned in my resume, I did blah, blah, blah. So when they ask you a thing, refer to the resume, right? So keep referring back to the resume when you can, because that will give them something to circle. They'll circle that item on the resume, and then when they go back after the fact, when they're evaluating who's the candidate, you'll have caused a situation where they actually took notes on your resume, and that will make you stand out against everybody else. Nobody else is going to do that, right? Most of the other people are just going to talk. They're not going to refer to the resume, and the person may or may not take notes because they're probably interviewing 10, 20, 30 candidates. It depends on how many they're doing. But if you refer to the resume and you encourage the person to take notes on the resume indirectly, you might end up getting more visibility later on when they go through the resume stack and they're evaluating it. When they're going through the resume stack, they'll come to your resume and they'll see that they took more notes on your resume than somebody else. And they said, oh, hey, here's a good thing here. And you can't refer back to the resume unless you have a good resume, which means you've got specific metrics and stuff. Separate video on that. So that would be the biggest thing. The number one thing, which Damadutch also recommended, is getting them mentally thinking they've already hired you, right? So the questions would be things like, what would be, when I start working for you, what is this? What is the one technology? And by the way, more precisely, the better. What is the one thing that I can master immediately so that when I work for you, I can immediately be productive? That is probably the most valuable question you could ever ask. And probably people are going to expect that you have heard that from me or somebody else, right? The reason that particular way of phrasing it is so important is because you are already mentally putting yourself in the place that, assuming you have the job. That nails for them the fact that you have the motivation to do it. They are going to know that you want the job because you're already mentally painting a picture for them that you've already got the job. So they're already assuming in their mind that you have the job, and you're already starting to you're demonstrating that you have already assumed that you're going to get that job. So saying things like, if I get this job, if I decide to take this job, if this turns out to be the job for me, that kind of stuff is not going to get you the job, even if you're not sure about the job. You need to talk in the interview like you have this job. Like, this is the only job that matters. Like, this is the one job that you want above every other job. And you want to convey that kind of feeling when you're doing the job interview, because that makes them whether or not you end up taking that job or another job, the perception is that they're going to think that this is the one that you really want, and that this is then you can go ahead and you can totally commit to that. So again, saying things like, when I start this job, so when I start this job on this great team, what is the number one thing that I would need to know to be immediately productive? And the thing that's cool about that is that causes them to also think very specifically about what your assignment would be. So they have to like dig apart. Well, what we have this over here, we have this over here, we have this over there. So that causes them to immediately kind of find you that first project, that first task that you have to do. They might say something like, well, we would immediately pair you with so and so because you need to get really good with Kubernetes, or need to get really good with Red Hat Satellite or Ansible, right? So they would immediately tell you those things that you have to do, and then you can sell it on that point. Again, it's the single most important thing you can do. There are a couple secondary things, and then some absolutely don't do things, and I'll mention those too. The second thing that I would say when you're doing the job interview is when it comes time to ask questions, demonstrate interest in the company specifically. This will go so far for separating you from everybody else. Everybody else who's in there doing the job interview, almost all of them will not have researched the company. And you will already have done this if you followed my other advice earlier on when you're preparing to get a job or preparing to learn, because you have already decided what you want to do every day. You have already targeted about 5 companies that represent the kind of work that you want to do, possibly the company you're interviewing for, which means you've already looked at those companies. You've already researched them to see what the jobs are, how they're operated, and you've got a mentor and or a recruiter. And so you're already dealing every day with the responsibilities and tasks of that job. So you will have already done research. If you've done this right, you will already have done research about the company that you're interviewing for. This isn't some random interview. This is you've already done the research. And before you go in for the interview, you should have spent an extra amount of time reviewing the mission of the company that you're interviewing for. So that means you need to demonstrate legitimate, authentic interest in the mission of the company. Whether or not you actually you care that much about the mission, which you probably should, don't lie, but you should demonstrate authentic interest. So when they give you a chance to ask a question, the first question I would say would be the softball question, because I would want to end with the other question that we already talked about. So I kind of did it in reverse order, right? So the first question I would say is, what do you ask them some specific question that's related to the company? Like if you were interviewing with such and such, you'd say, what is your position on AI in the industry and how has it impacted you? I understand you've added it to your IT department. Where do you see its position in the company? I noticed that you use it for X and Y specific thing, which was in the news recently. Right? So now you're demonstrating legitimate, sincere interest in the company and the company's mission and the company's controversies, the thing that are making the company, that may demonstrate that you are interested in where this company is going. If you're interviewing with one of the more controversial companies out there, and there are many, then you might want to ask that question point blank, not because you're casting doubt on the company, but you want to say, what is your position on this? You've been working it. And then the second sort of secondary question I would ask, and you got to be careful with this one, because if you ask it early, you might end up getting in trouble. So, and I asked this on my question. I said, can you describe your role on the company to me? So you turn it around and you interview them. You interview the team that's interviewing you, and you get them to talk about themselves. And if there's one key to building relationships of trust, it's getting somebody to talk about themselves and listening to them. So you have been talking about how awesome you are this whole time, and in the back of their mind, a couple of them are probably going like, well, damn, that's cool. Oh, that person's just flexing. God, who does this person think they are? But as soon as you start building a relationship of trust with the people who are interviewing, and there's some people who know this technique and they will fight back. They'll be like, oh, he's trying to be my friend now. No, you don't have to ask inauthentically. You say something like this. You say, you know what? Would y'all mind describing your role in the company and how long you've been in the company and what you enjoy most about working for the company? Many of them will actually jump at the chance to tell you. When I did this once, I learned that one of the people that was interviewing me had been in the position for 20 years. No way. I was like, oh my God, that was so cool. I was able to show legitimate, sincere appreciation for that kind of commitment to that particular role in the company. And I said, well, tell me about that. How did that work? Well, I actually started out doing medical technology. I said, oh, that's so cool. I was thinking about medical technology at one point too. And then they're like, yeah. And then I got into this, and then I started doing this, and I started out doing this and this and this. And they give you their resume. Now you have built a relationship already with a potential future team member. So when it comes time to evaluate you, they're going to remember that you showed sincere interest in the company and the team. That means you asked questions about the company that show that you've done the research about the company. And number two, you've done research about, or you've asked about the members of the team. Now, some of them are going to say, no, I don't have to tell you any of that. You're the one being interviewed. And there are people who will do that. I've actually been in an interview where I attempted to build a relationship of trust and hear about someone, and they go, and they literally said, well, you're the one being interviewed. And they kind of snarkily shut up. And it was usually the SME. It's usually the overworked engineer that they pulled in to evaluate whether you're going to be technically able to do the thing. And usually they will have felt sincerely and very threatened the whole time because your skills are on par or better than theirs. And I got to tell you, you got to watch out for that person who's on the team. I've been that person on the team. When you're doing a job interview, there's going to be a subject matter expert who's not going to have particularly good social skills, who is an expert. They are really good at technology, and they like being the king of the castle. And if they see you as a threat, or if they see you as somebody that they can't work with, I mean, that's the hardest person to win over, because that's the person who's actually going to say, something. And frankly, it depends on how the other team is managed. But if somebody on the team says, if that person says, well, they seem like they know what they're doing, but whatever, you know what I mean? That's going to be high praise from that kind of person. There's going to be one or two other people that have social skills, and particularly the hiring manager, and they'll want to tell you everything. It doesn't hurt to attempt to build relationships of trust. And you can ask this question very sincerely. And if they say, we don't have time to talk about us, I say, well, in order for me to take this position, I'm just curious to understand why you're working for this team. What are your motivations for working for the team? Because I have my own motivations, but I'd like to know about your history and your motivations. What do you enjoy about working here? And I think that's a very legitimate, very sincere, very humble question. And if they shut you down and say, we don't have time for that, fine. You've at least attempted to demonstrate interest in the team that you're about to be working for. You have demonstrated interest in the company that you're working for by doing that. And you have ended by asking questions that are in sort of a present tense or a future tense. So when I start with you guys, what is the one thing that you would have me learn that's going to get me going, so you don't have to, it's going to reduce my amount of time. So you've got them thinking that you're already on the team. You're already interacting with potential future members of the team, including the potential manager, as if you are on the team. And the last question you end with is, when I'm working with you guys, so when I start with you guys, what is the one thing I could learn right now today that would make me immediately productive, that you need the most help with, so I can get going on it right now? And then you leave the interview and you shake hands, or if you're in person. If not, you're like, thank you very much. This sounds like a fantastic team. Legitimate. If you don't like the team, don't say that. They'll see through it. Don't lie. If the interview didn't go well and the team is not like legitimately interested in you and you're not gelling with the team, then say, thank you very much for your time, and then leave. But don't lie. Don't pretend like you're their best buddy. They'll see right through that. But if you ask those legitimate questions, you may actually open up an opportunity to build relationships of trust. And then you might, and that relationship of trust is going to directly lead to employment, because trust is the nature of employment. Employment is about trust. I've done a whole video about that before. So focus on that, and I think you'll do fine. Make sure your tech skills are up to par. Make sure you're honest. That means if they ask you about something, you don't lie. Say, like in my interview, I said point blank, I've never done Kubernetes. I've played around with it in a home lab a little bit, but I don't have any Kubernetes skills. And they said, oh, that's fine. And they got kind of like, you're fine. You can learn it, right? Because there was other things on my resume. And because I was forthcoming and didn't say, oh yeah, I've got 20 years of, I didn't lie, then they were okay with it. Now, I think that is a lot of advice, but again, the entire interview is an opportunity for you to build relationships and trust with your future team, and to get them assuming you're a member of the team already by the time you leave. Just keep that in your mind above everything else. All right. Hopefully that video was fine. And we'll go further on that. Oh, you got a Starlink. A Starlink Mini is confirmed. Okay, well, we're going to talk about that. Stop recording.